This is another great day. Welcome to the Varied Life. Steve here. And today we're going to talk about the 10 things that you need to consider when you're going to retire overseas. And I got to look over some notes here so I don't forget anything, but a little bit of background on me. The wife and I, what we ended up doing, we sold everything we had, house, cars, pots, pans, everything in the kitchen junk drawer. And we put stuff in a couple of suitcases and we retired overseas. Yeah, that was a huge move for us. We didn't move anything. It was just like, hey, here's what we're doing, and we're taking off. And we ended up in South Korea. So a lot of people are like, okay, wow, retirement. A lot of people are having a hard time grasping being able to retire in the United States. The average person cannot retire in the United States. There's a number of articles talking about how people who are seniors are looking to work into their 70s. Something, I think the statistic was like 40% of the people are looking to retire or to continue working at the time at which they should retire and keep working because they can't afford it. That the expenses are too high, they don't have enough money saved. And so overseas retirement has become more and more of a thing, especially for people that are my age. I'm going to be 57 and pretty damn soon. So we've got that going on. But we're going to talk about these 10 things about retiring overseas. And the first one is talking about financial stability. In the United States, I would have to work until I was almost 70 to be able to retire. Now, I have a pension from the United States military as being enlisted. It's obviously not enough to be able to retire on, so there is some other money that is involved. But when you're talking about retiring overseas, there's less expenses, but the big thing that you need to look at is your budget and the money coming in. So we're looking at retirement income, we're looking at pensions, investments, Social Security benefits, things of that nature that will help fund your overseas retirement. The sad thing is, unfortunately, in the United States, for the average person, your Social Security, you can't even make it now with the high prices and the increases in expenses for housing. That is the biggest expense that you're going to have. And so then it becomes a Section 8 thing. Then it becomes to a place of where, you're in, maybe a not so well area, an area that is not as safe to try to get the lower rents and so on and so forth. But you need to have some type of budget. But the good news is that if you have Social Security, there's a lot of countries overseas where that amount of money you can retire on comfortably. Not saying that it's going to be lavish, as a lot of videos online that we see. Oh, your Social Security. Oh, you can retire on $700 a month in this country. There was one guy that ended up doing a video. Oh, you can retire on $500 a month, and it's like, but when you get down to it, he's living out in the sticks. There's dirt roads. There's no indoor plumbing. There's a number of things that you trade off when you're getting that low. But anyway, you have to have some type of income to retire overseas. So either you have pensions, investments, or have some type of income by working digitally. In other words, you're working remotely. That seems to be a big thing. It was really big during COVID and things like that, but now companies are bringing people back to work, and so they're not doing the remote work anymore. Number two, the second thing that people look for in retiring overseas, especially people my age and older, are healthcare services. Health insurance. Do you have health insurance? Does the country that you're retiring to, do they offer health insurance through their country? Do you have health insurance that, like I have health insurance through my military pension? Do countries that you're planning to retire to, can you use that healthcare insurance in another country? Will it be accepted? Or, again, when it comes to budget, how much are you going to be able to use for healthcare? So, for example, you have places, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's Thailand, and it ends up being like $80, $100 a month, 100 something, somewhere around there. But when you hit a certain age, like 70 or 80 or whatever, you're basically on your own. You can't get health insurance anymore. So, there needs to be that discussion and that conversation about what are you going to do later in life. The other thing with healthcare services are medical facilities. So, like the gentleman that said, "Oh, I'm living on $500 a month." Yeah, he is, but he's out in the sticks. There's dirt roads. There's no indoor plumbing, no electricity, so on and so forth. Where is the closest medical clinic? Where's the closest hospital? And as we get older, things start breaking down. I'm just saying. So, how long and how far away are these medical clinics, and are they up to a standard that you're used to of getting good medical care? There's a number of places that you can go to that has real inexpensive housing, and it doesn't cost much, but the medical care services are really, really lacking. So realize there's going to be some trade-offs there when we talk about that. So some countries, like for example here in Korea, their healthcare is really, really good. I've had nothing but good results. I just recently had a surgery I had one retinal tear here, I had four retinal tears here, a cataract, and then I also had detached retina. My military healthcare insurance, TRICARE Overseas Select, paid for everything, and I went to one of the biggest three medical centers in Korea, and it had awesome, awesome service. Clean, no attitudes like you would see in the United States. You always get people rolling their eyes, and it's an inconvenience that you're going to the hospital, and interrupting their time on their phone. I mean, I've seen that so many times in the United States. It's the exact opposite of what I found in Korea. But the quality of the care that you get, along with the is it available? That's something else that you need to take a look at. The other thing that might be a consideration is cultural compatibility. So, in other words, do you need to have people from your own ethnicity or country, maybe fellow expats, that you need to be around those people to have a sense of community? And is that important for you? Is it important for you to have other people who are like you to be able to live overseas? For some people, the answer is yes. Other people, the answer is no. Some people immerse themselves into a country and they don't care if there's expats there or not. It doesn't really matter to them. The biggest thing that you need to find out is what you can handle and what you can do. For us here, we live in South Korea and we're close to a military base. And since I'm prior military, retired military, we get to go on post. So there is this sense of community. Talk to people, from the United States, kind of like-minded and so on and so forth. So that works out well for us. But for some people, it might be hard of just coming to a foreign country, but then coming to a foreign country and having no contact with any other fellow expats. That can be kind of draining, and it can be real isolating. It can be lonely, even though that you could be in a bustling city. If there's no expats around, there can be that loneliness because you don't have that cultural compatibility. If you have problems learning languages, I have some problems learning languages because of some injuries that I incurred while I was in service. And so, my language skills are kind of lacking. Is that going to come into play? So, respecting people, where you were in the United States and the cultural norms that are there, are they the same or similar, or you're going to have to adjust to new cultural norms so that you're not that ugly American? Those are all things that you need to take into consideration. And I think another aspect of cultural compatibility is, can you do things in a foreign country and not have the attitude, well, in the United States, they just do it like this, and in the United States, they do it, this is so stupid, because in the United States, do you just whine and complain? Don't be that guy or gal. Let's go ahead and hit number 4. We're talking about visa, residency, retirement requirements, and so on and so forth. Some countries have retirement visas that are specifically geared towards people who are trying to retire overseas. The ones that come to mind are Philippines, Thailand. Those are some big ones. Portugal has some good ones. Some European countries that offer some benefits to being a retired expat and living in those countries. Visa requirements are very different. They're very easy to attain versus some other countries like South Korea. South Korea doesn't really have a retirement visa unless you invest a ton of money into a Korean business or into the Korean economy or whatever. For people like me, that's not going to happen. So they don't have a visa program purely for retirement. The way that we were able to retire in Korea is because my wife was a returning Korean national. So that comes into play. If we didn't, if we weren't able to do that, we might have gone to Malaysia, we might have gone to Thailand or, Philippines or, somewhere close to Korea. But yeah, there's a lot of different things that come into that. And with the visa requirements, are you in a country where there's a lot of bureaucracy? If it's hard to get your visa renewals versus easy, how is that going to play on you? Are you going to have to leave the country for a day or two and then do a border run and then come back and then extend your visa? Do you have to do that every 90 days? Or is it every year or every few years? I can tell you that, my visa, my approved visa was initially granted 1 year term of service. So I had 1 year residency, and then if I wanted to renew it, back that up 4 months, and then I can put in for a renewal. Put in some other supporting documents and, marriage certificate, and that we had a kid and so on and so forth. Then we were able to get my visa extended up to 2 years. So, that comes into play. How easy it is to get the visa, the retirement visa, the renewals, and understanding all of those things. You might need an immigration attorney to help you. I know in places like Thailand and Philippines, not so much, but Thailand definitely, that it seems to be beneficial to have an immigration lawyer or work with an office that does those things. For us here in Korea, we used an immigration lawyer, and we're still using an immigration lawyer because they are most up to date on all of the changes, all of the paperwork. I just finished my visa renewal, and it ended up being 7 days. So, not counting the weekend, it really came down to 5 days in my visa approval. My renewal got approved. So, other places, it takes longer. Other places, if they're really corrupt, to kind of smooth the way, you might have to pay some money to somebody. It's not an official fee, but basically you're bribing to get your stuff at the top of the stack. Heard horror stories about Mexico and places do you really want to put up with corruption? Do you want to put up with a bureaucracy that is just pulling your hair out every time that you have to do it? So those are some things. And then the other thing that comes into play is cost with the visa and the retirement. Malaysia looked like an awesome place. I've been watching videos on that, and I was like, man, we need to go visit. Then I found out Malaysia just changed their retirement visa program, and it used to be something like $1,500 a month, or close to $2,000, somewhere within that range, that you could retire in Malaysia. And rents are inexpensive, food is inexpensive, so on and so forth. But the new changes to My Malaysia Second Home program, they changed it in 2023, this year, and now you have to make almost $9,000 a month income to be able to use that retirement visa. So they went, in the past, I read an article, and it was talking about how they had 6,000 applicants under the old program, but under the new program, they've only had like 357. And that's the other thing when we talk about retiring overseas, is that things can change at a drop of a hat. Visa requirements, you might get the demographic or the political atmosphere of the country changes because you get a new leader, a different leader, and they have a total different take on immigration. They can tighten the screws, they can make it so that It's very hard for expats, or they can make it very easy just at their whim. So, the days of picking a country and retiring and being there for the rest of your life and then until you shed this mortal coil, I think those days have gone. It's very hard to be able to find places where, in the back of your mind, Mexico used to be a real good place to retire, and because it was safe, it was great, it was close to the United States, but for safety and security, close to the United States, but for safety and security concerns, now we're seeing a lot of cartel, we're seeing a lot of crime, corruption, not only corruption within the government, but the immigration services and so on and so forth. A lot of horror stories coming from Mexico. And the fact that if a country can't take care of its own people and keep their own people safe, do they really have a vested interest? Least is born and raised here, never felt unsafe. Of course, if you go out and look for students, never felt unsafe in South Korea. And so there's more respect in Asian countries and some for people as a whole as compared to the United States. Then there's also some other countries where you definitely don't want to retire in certain places because the locals there do not like foreigners. So, and then there's high crime, there's rampant crime, the police don't enforce the rules and the laws that they have. So definitely look at that. And as you get older, I'm going to be 57 here. There's going to be a time of where you're not going to be able to defend yourself, that you're going to have to rely on the status quo, the norm of the people that you live with in regards to safety and security. And if that is really low and there's a lot of crime, the older you get, the more possibility of you being a victim of crime. And things can change. Just like the can change at a drop of a hat, so can wide, whether they, yeah, there's a lot that goes into that. There are places that used to be real good retirement places for people in Mexico have now been overridden with crime, resorts, murders, rapes, assaults, the whole nine yards, where it's basically people have said, okay, well, don't ever go here. Don't retire here. It's not worth going. So look at the country that you're going to and look at the overall, I guess, the demographic and a lot of other things comes into play besides crime. But yeah, how do they treat foreigners? What is the religious belief and the overtone of the country itself? Is it a really diverse country? Is it open? Is it accepting of people of different religious faiths or groups, or people, races, identities, and so on and so forth? That can go a long way into safety and security, because for some people it might be great. For other people, it might not be so great. So yeah, that's something to take into your thinking process. Climate and lifestyle. This is number 6. You retire overseas, and a lot of people, you see the beaches and the tropical greens everywhere. The tropical green comes into play, but it's like it comes at a cost. There's heat and humidity. It's here in Korea right now. I mean, we're looking at, let's see, what are we looking at? It's 80 degrees right now, and it's 7:30 in the morning, and we're looking at 83% humidity. So yeah, and it gets a lot worse. So when we're looking at being in the high 80s, it's feeling like it's over 100 degrees with the temperatures and the humidity, the heat index, and all of that. So while the lush green beaches might seem like a great thing, it does come at a price. And can you handle that? Or do you need to go to an area that is a little bit more mountainous, it's a little bit cooler? It all depends on what you're comfortable with in that type of lifestyle. So yeah, I know everybody wants that 75 to 85 degree year round comfortable, temperature and just living the retired life. But rarely does that happen. You're going to have a wet season, you're going to have a dry season, you're going to have tornadoes or hurricanes, or you're going to have some flooding issues, and winters could be brutally cold, or the summers could be oppressively hot, which means you're going to have to use your air conditioning and your expenses are going to go up. Which leads us into our next consideration, number 7, which is the cost of living. So cost of living is really interesting because a lot of places overseas, they have lower cost of living than in the United States. And like I just finished looking at Zillow, and for rental places where we used to live, close to Canyon City, Colorado, Colorado Springs, and so on and so forth. But we were in Canyon City, in that area, smaller, 10, 20,000, people, 30,000 in that town. But when you're looking for a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, decent place, you're going to spend a minimum of $1,000 a month. And because I know those areas, that those are not safe areas to be in for that price. You need to look at 12, $1,500, $1,600, $1,800 to be in a safe neighborhood. And those rents are for 1-bedroom, maybe a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, and with no garage. It's just a cheap apartment, and you're paying that much money. So you're wondering, it's like, well, how do people on Social Security that are only making $1,000 a month, how are they able to survive? Now there's Section 8 housing, government subsidized, and of course those areas are generally have higher crime areas. It's just the cost of living in the United States has really gotten to the point of where it's unaffordable. So when we see, back in my day, when I was a teenager, I joined the Army when I was 17, and off of my paycheck in the Army, that was like $700 a month or whatever, I could afford rent. I could afford rent, and I could live off of a military post, and I could survive. Today, we get mad as boomers or seniors because, all these youngsters are living at home with their parents or whatever, and they're not getting out and getting their own place. And it's like, well, when you look at the rental places for like Colorado Springs, Denver area, and it's just so outpriced. The housing expenses has gone up here, but the pay has not kept up with that. So and especially now that we're in a recession, now it makes everything more expensive and your money's worth less. So it just compounds the problem even more. So when we're talking about cost of living, the biggest thing that we're looking at is housing. There's a number of places in Thailand where you can rent, and condos. Here in Korea, you can rent places. The different rental situations here in different countries. So it might be a monthly rent, or it might be 6-month to a year contract. You can find a variety of different housing options, but you need to be cognizant of those. But generally, what we have found that it's cheaper here in South Korea, and it's definitely cheaper in Thailand and some other places, the Philippines, compared to rents in the United States. Now, how much you want and how much you can afford, those can be two different things. But generally, across the board, overseas retirement, when we looked at Thailand, we looked at Philippines, we looked at Bali, we looked at Costa Rica, Puerto Rico. Of course, we ended up in Korea. But where we could be comfortable, me and my wife, the rents, that's your biggest expense right there, your biggest living expense. We found that it was much cheaper than in the United States. Matter of fact, let me see if I can pull this up. Let me see if I got this. So, like for example, let's go ahead and we'll take a look at this here, and I'll show you what I mean. The difference between Korea and the United States. So for example, this is comparing Colorado and Korea, and so like a efficiency 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartment in Colorado where we were living was about $850. Back at the time that I did this was a number of months ago, and now it's like close to $1,000. Electricity, $125, water and sewer, trash, we can see the prices there. Internet, $65, $75, gas, heat, Depending on the time of year, averaged about 65, taxes if you had a mortgage. But you're looking at about 1330 a month. And that was for a very, that's for an efficiency apartment. So if we come to Korea and the efficiency apartment that we had, our mortgage or rent, I should say, was $490 a month. For electricity, water, sewer, trash, internet was all included in the apartment that we were renting. That came out to $130. Gas and heat was $24. That would go up because of the heat and the humidity, and of course there's no property tax, so you're looking at $650 a month. So as we can see, I mean, here in Korea, it's definitely less expensive than what we saw in the United States. So when I did the search for Colorado and the area that we used to live in, Canyon City, Florence, Colorado area, that for a one bedroom efficiency, yeah, you're gonna spend $1,300-1,500 a month. Efficiency apartments here in Korea, similar sizes, with a bathroom, full bath, tub, shower, the whole nine yards. $400, $500. That's a big difference because you're talking about 50% less than in the United States. So, now when you start saying, okay, well, I have $1,000 a month with Social Security, how attractive is it to retire overseas if I can barely make it in the United States, but now I can go overseas and retire, and now it's half of what I would pay in the United States. So that's why people are like, wow, maybe this overseas retirement thing is, maybe I need to make some compromises. Maybe it's going to be a smaller expat community. Maybe I'm going to have to downsize. Maybe I'm not going to live the lap of luxury like I was in the United States and kind of ratchet back on some of that, but I'll be able to make it and might even be able to save a few $100 a month by retiring overseas. Yeah. The other thing, number 8, we're talking about social and recreational activities. There's a number of people who retire overseas and all they want to do is drink. They go to the bars. I saw a video of a guy who retired from Australia, and that's his thing, is drinking. And if that's what he wants to do, that's what he considers retirement. And the pinnacle of retirement is just going to bars and drinking and getting, laying on a beach and eating and a lot of drinking. This guy drinks a lot. If that's your idea of retirement, you can do that anywhere. But to have a more vibrant retirement, most people should look into social activities, recreational activities, definitely hobbies, learning things to keep your mind and body occupied, whether it's physical fitness or it's using your brain or, trips or hiking or whatever it is. Maybe it's art, maybe it's composing, maybe it's writing a book, maybe it's, whatever it is, you need to have some type of social and recreational activities to keep yourself occupied when you're retired. For me, that's health and fitness. That's the big thing. And then, of course, we're getting into traveling. And you need to find what's going to make you happy. And whether it's doing yoga or, whatever it is, it's good to know those things before you retire. So that way it's like, okay, well, I always want to do this. I always want to do this, or my passion is this, but I just couldn't do it while I was working. Now's the time to step out and live your passion. So the number 9, now this is kind of a big one for some people. It talks about family and friends and how attached you are. And living overseas, some people have such strong familial bonds that they cannot retire outside of the United States. Or if they do retire out of the United States, they're so homesick, they're so lost, I miss auntie this and grandma and grandpa and mom and dad and siblings and whatever, retirement overseas ends up being miserable. So you need to understand you. I don't have a lot of family that I'm concerned with in the United States. There's a lot of dysfunction going on, which every family has dysfunction, so no big surprise there. But there's nothing holding me back in the United States. So retiring overseas it's not a big deal for me to retire overseas. We have my wife's family over here, and they're awesome. We're still kind of off on our own because it's been me and the wife for like 33 years, and we're our own family. We do have a daughter. She's in the military as a doctor and doing that doctor thing and stuff. And so she's moving around. So really, there's nothing holding us back in the United States. And you need to find out if there's something that's holding you back from retiring overseas. Now, if you have such a tight bond with your kids, that's awesome, that's great. But if it's going to cause you depression, if it's going to cause you problems, then you might want to consider retiring overseas or making some compromises. Now, this can be a good thing because if you're far away from your family, it costs more to get there. So maybe your retirement plans overseas, you're going to look for countries that are closer to the United States or wherever your family and home is at. So that might be a consideration. Maybe you have to take trips, 1 or 2 trips a year to go back to the States and to see your family wherever they are, to maintain those relationships so that you don't feel bad. Or the other thing, you could have your family members come and visit you. So there's a number of different ways to overcome that, but only you can answer that question of whether you can retire overseas and whether you can be away from family over short distances or long distances. And this brings us to technology for the infrastructure and communication. Now, in a lot of countries, the internet has been a godsend because back in the day when I was in the military and I first came to Korea in 1988, there was no email, there was no video chat or messenger or FaceTime or none of that stuff. States. Other than that, I was writing letters. It's hard to believe nowadays that people would have to do that. But with the internet and technology now, a lot of countries have jumped on technology. They have internet, they have high speed, they have broadband, the whole 9 yards. Cell phone coverage is really great. Some countries don't have as good a coverage in their countries because the infrastructure and the communication system that they have isn't up to the level of what you're used to in your home country. So that other infrastructure that we're talking about, roads. There's a lot of countries that you can retire in, but their road systems are they're storm, and you're not going to be able to get to the hospital. Your roads are going to be closed, or you're not going to be able to get to certain places until it dries out or whatever. It's just utilities. There's a number of places where utilities are really inexpensive, but then the infrastructure of those utilities is really poor compared to the home country that you're in. So you have rolling blackouts, brownouts, usage. There's not it can be an adventure, And if we're talking about things like, well, what if you have to have medical supplies that need to be refrigerated? Are you going to go to a country that is known for having rolling blackouts and not a well-established electrical grid to keep your medicines cold or whatever it is? Or maybe you're on oxygen and you have your own need to be plugged in and to give you oxygen or whatever. Or maybe you might need oxygen when you get older because of medical complications. So you really need to think about not only now, but also into the future when we're talking about infrastructure and communication, utilities, because those can have a very big impact on your day-to-day life. When we're younger and we're healthy, it's like, rolling blackout, I don't care. I'm retired. It doesn't really, I'll just go to the beach or I'll just, hang out. But when you start throwing in medical complications and things of that nature, how are the roads? Where are the medical facilities? Are they up to par, and do they offer good services? All of the things that come with infrastructure in a country, you need to look at that as well. So really, before you embark on this, you need to look at the financial stability and the ability that you have, in other words, funds, healthcare services of the country that you're going to, cultural compatibility, visa and residency requirements, safety and security of the country that you're going to, climate and the lifestyle. Are you compatible with that? Let's say if you're a really high stress guy or gal and you go to a country that is super laid back and everything's on kind of like island time, are you going to be able to adapt to that? The cost of living, recreational activities, being away from family and friends in the United States or your home country, is that going to be a deal killer? And then, of course, the last one that we just talked about was the country's infrastructure and communication systems and utilities and so on and so forth. Some people can roll with the punches and it's no problem if they're out of power for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. It's not a big deal. Can you handle that? Here in Korea, we ended up, I think we've had one power outage and it was only for a few minutes. So, the power grid here in Korea is pretty good. The roads are really good. There is a lot of flooding during the rainy season, of which we're in now, high heat, humidity, rain. But the area that we're in, it doesn't seem to be a problem. It doesn't impact us because we're in an area that's not prone to flooding. So, think about that as well. Some people, for example, this one guy, he had retired, I think it was in the Philippines, and it ends up they had a typhoon or some big storm, tropical storm come through, just boom, wiped out everything. And so it was like, okay, yeah, this isn't going to work because the utilities were down, couldn't get anywhere, wiped out the place where he was living, and it would have to basically redo it. Now, do you want to do that as an older person? He didn't, so what he ended up doing is looking for places that was kind of like on higher ground that wouldn't be affected as much through tropical storms or flash flooding and things of that nature. So, a lot of that comes into play as well. So anyway, there's a lot of research and evaluation that comes into play when we're talking about retiring overseas. There's definitely, you got to do your research. You will see some people that just pack up and leave and do zero research and they just roll with the punches. It's kind of like whatever the universe brings, man, I'm going to just do that. But I think that's the exception. It's not the rule. So yeah, and if you can do that, that's awesome. But I would say for the average person, you need to look at these 10 things, take these things into consideration, start doing your research, watching videos, then take vacations to these places that interest you as possible retirement countries. And then, everybody wants to go to the beach, but it's different from being in a vacation touristy area versus living and being an expat. Those can be two entirely different things. Thailand, it's like, you have Pattaya, you have Phuket, you have places that are just littered with bars and bar girls and the whole nine yards. And it's like, yeah, it's fun and it's touristy and things like that, but do you really want to retire there? For me and my wife, that would not be a place where we would want to retire because we're not into that scene. We're not and we're not into bars or of what you want to do now and also what you want to do in the future as a senior, an older person than what you are now. Maybe that is your thing and that's up to you, but take that into consideration. So anyway, yeah, there's a lot of enticing reasons as why people want to retire overseas or have this desire because they can't do it in the United States and they're looking at they don't have enough money saved, the rising expenses in housing, their money doesn't go as far in the United States, so they're gonna have to continue working into their 70s. I think the article ended up talking about how like a fourth of the people of the survey that were surveyed were saying, yeah, we're gonna have to work until into our 70s before we can retire. And really, when you talk about life expectancy, you retire at 67 or 70 years old, or you're talking maybe 72 to get max Social Security or whatever money, nickels that you have saved together, and then retire. How many years left do you have to enjoy your retirement? And I think this is the bonus one, number 11. I'll add this as a bonus, is how long do you want to be able to spend retirement? Does it make sense to work, 30, 40, 50 years and then only have like a handful of years in retirement? Or would it be, is it something that's like, okay, well, I can retire early overseas. I might have to make some compromises in my standard of living and a number of other things, but I don't have to work and I can pursue some dreams and passions and just give my boss the finger and enjoy my retirement years for many, many, many more years compared to the normal retirement in the United States. Yeah, that also comes into play. Your mental. I know that if I kept at the rate that I was going, I got some connection problems here. But yeah, that's something to look at as well. So when we're talking about retiring and talking about doing these things, your mental health comes into play. And I got to a place where I just couldn't do it anymore. And so it was a wake up call. I was a train wreck. I was a hot mess. And physically, mentally, dealing with a lot of problems, PTSD, depression, anxiety, high stress job. It just really ended up, it was a culmination of things that just wasn't good. So yeah, that needs to come into consideration as well. Is the downsizing and the compromises that you might have to make to retire overseas, will that put you in a better place mentally, physically, and emotionally? That's another bonus one that you have there. So anyway, but that's what we got going on. Just some things to think about when we're talking about retiring overseas, wherever it is. Do your research. Do a lot of research. Take some vacations and check some places out. Get on to social media and the groups that, expat communities, and you can just glean a lot of great information to help you look at the possibilities of retiring overseas. So that's going to be it. And yeah, we'll see you on the next video. Okay. Peace. Good stuff. Good stuff.